Well, hello and welcome. This will be the first video in a 6-video series on the topic of the Protestant Reformation. So hopefully you'll join me for all 6 videos. In today's video, I'm going to lay a little bit of foundational information for the topic of the Protestant Reformation. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so the topic of the Protestant Reformation is a religious topic. It's about a religious movement, and specifically, the movement was a movement for reform for the Christian faith as it was playing out at the time in Europe. And so I think one thing that's important to understand before we get into talking about reform and what was changing is to make sure you have a good sense of the origins of the Christian faith, because this was a Christian reform movement. So what I want to just take a few minutes to go through in today's video is information on early Christianity. When talking about matters of faith, whether you're talking about the Christian faith or any other faith, there are different things that people may choose to believe. One thing about faith is it's really about believing something that may not be able to be proven. So again, whether you're talking about Christianity, whether you're talking about Islam or Judaism, whether you're talking about Buddhism, Hinduism, or just any other faith perspective, there are likely some tangible things that you can look to as real evidence, fact-based things, and then there's also a faith element. So what I'm going to be running through with the origins of Christianity is talking about just some of the nuts and bolts of where this faith emerged from. Now, what you choose to believe about the faith may certainly vary from person to person. So I'm going to try to stick to the facts. So when talking about Christianity, its origins go back to the 1st century. And of course, the central figure with Christianity is a person named Jesus. Now, people certainly will believe different things about Jesus, but the thing that I want to emphasize is that this was a real person. Jesus was a real person, not some mythical creature or made-up story. His life is, especially for the time period, is probably better documented than anybody from this time, or certainly anywhere near this time period. So one thing that is indisputable is that Jesus was a real person. Now, whether you choose to believe everything that has been written about Jesus or not, whether you choose to see it more as metaphorical ideas on different topics, or whether you see it as 100% fact, again, that's going to vary person to person. But this was a real man who had an impact on the people in the part of the world where he was living, and the people that believed in what he had to say were the people that became the first Christians. Now, something that's important to recognize about the time and place that Jesus lived and had an influence on people is he was living in a time when the Roman Empire existed. He was living in a place where the Roman Empire existed. And one thing about the Roman Empire, it tended to want to have things its way. And so during the time when Jesus was alive, there was certainly attention given to him by local leadership within the Roman Empire. And when he was gone, there was concern for what had been left behind, so to speak, because people who became the early Christ followers were people that, at least as far as the Roman Empire was concerned, were seen as a bit of a threat, because the early Christ followers in particular seemed to give their allegiance to this man Jesus and God, and didn't necessarily seem to give the kind of allegiance that Roman officials expected them to get. And so Christianity, or these early Christians, definitely experienced persecution within the Roman Empire and those first couple hundred years after Jesus had come and gone. And so the hope, I think, from the Roman Empire's perspective was if they made it clear that to be a Christ follower wasn't going to go well for you, that it would be something that would kind of fizzle out and go by the wayside, and things would, in a sense, get back to normal. And so despite significant consequences, and then by significant consequences, I mean as significant as death for continuing to be a Christ follower, the number of people who were Christ followers just continued to grow and grow and grow. So try as the Roman Empire might, for at least the first couple hundred years after Jesus's life and death, they couldn't get rid of them. So when looking at what came next, we see a shift in the policy within the Roman Empire, a shift from persecuting Christ followers and trying to get that faith perspective to go away, to actually choosing to make Christianity, the Christian faith, a legal religion within the Roman Empire. By the year 313, 313, Christianity became legal. So that was definitely a big transition and a big shift. And actually, before that century was over, it went from being, persecuted faith to being allowed, being legal, to then actually becoming the faith of the Roman Empire. The Emperor Constantine had what we might describe as a religious experience, where he attributed the God and the God of Christianity, the God of the Christians, for success that he had, and that ended up ultimately leading to a full-on shift to the Roman Empire embracing Christianity and, in fact, requiring that faith. Now, you can choose to look at this shift probably in one of two ways. You can look at it as truly a religious experience by someone in leadership who could make this change, and that was what it was about. Or if you want to take a more cynical approach, you could really view that as the Roman Empire wanting to be the authority, wanting to be in power, recognizing that the efforts to get rid of Christianity failed. So essentially they took a if you can't beat them, join them kind of approach, that rather than letting this group of people operate independently within the Roman Empire, they were going to simply take it over themselves and be the ones in charge of it. Either way, whatever the true motives were, by the end of the 300s, Christianity was the faith of the Roman Empire. And that would continue to be the case moving forward, as long as the Roman Empire continued to exist. Now, the Roman Empire would go through some struggles over time, and it would ultimately fizzle out in most places. But where it would have a very lasting legacy as it related to Christianity was in Europe. And so with the topic of the Protestant Reformation, we're going to be taking a look at what happened with Christianity and how it was changing in Europe. And so if you pick up from the end of the 300s, when the faith was embraced by the Roman Empire, that would be representative of the Christian church in Europe over the next 1,000+ years or so. And what I think is important to understand going into talking about a time of reform is that whether people truly were faithful people or not living in Europe with the faith of Christianity, the Christian church, the Roman Catholic Church, was a dominant force in everybody's lives. In a lot of ways, the Christian church, the Catholic Church, which the term Catholic just means universal church, the Catholic Church in Europe very much had the same kind of role that the federal government does in the United States today, where it was involved in lots of different things. It was involved in a faith perspective, certainly, but it was also involved in a lot of social services, whether that was educational opportunities, healthcare opportunities, kind of you name it. What are the types of things that a government might do in a society? Chances are the church was involved with that. So however people felt about the church, it was a strong force in people's lives. And when you have something that is such a strong force in your life, you're going to tend to have an opinion about how it operates. And so when we look at the Protestant Reformation, basically that represents a time in Europe when people began to really ask some questions about how the church was operating and whether or not the church was operating as it should be. And so as we get into the next several videos, we'll talk about what was going on in Europe at the time and who the influential people were and what their ideas were that would begin to change Christianity in Europe. And I think that's where we'll leave it for today. Hopefully you'll join me for my next video. Thanks.